My dad told me this story when he was back in Laos. One night, he and his little brother, who was maybe around 9 or 11 years old, went hunting. My dad was carrying a rifle while my uncle just tagged along. My dad said that they were going to spend the night in their farming hut until morning. They had a little fire going inside for light. In the middle of the night, my dad saw a little girl enter through the walls and started playing with the fire ashes. She had long nappy hair and was the size of a toddler. The little girl was making child-playing noises like any other toddler. My dad got very frightened and silently woke up my uncle. He grabbed his rifle and shot one time into the air. The little girl was startled and yelled out this loud screeching noise and ran through the wall. Then, my dad and my uncle ran out of the home. He said that when they were running out of the house, the surrounding plants and wind were going out of control like a tornado. He told his younger brother to run out front. My dad shot one time in the front, side to side, and it backed off of them while they were running home. Then, a couple of days later, they got sick and did a ritual and got better. That's what my dad told me. One day, my uncles, my cousins, and I all went fishing. Right when we got there, we parked the car, and then we split up into 4 groups so that there's 3 in each group. During this time, there was a dog barking at cats walking down the street. My 2 cousins and I went to go fish in a spot that looked like a forest. I tossed my fishing bait into the water to test my fishing spot. Then afterwards, I went through my tackle box and then sat down and waited. After a while, I got bored, so I said to my 2 cousins that I was going to go out to look for some sticks. They responded that I should get them one too. So I went, but right then, something was touching my back. So I looked and saw nothing. I yelled at my cousins and asked if they were still there, and they replied that they were, so I walked faster, then looked at the trees for branches. And when I was doing so, I saw what seems to be a girl in a white dress, and she had a bloody smile staring at me. I walked back and sat by a tree. All of a sudden, I felt like water was dripping onto me, so I looked at my arm and saw that it was blood. And then I looked up at the tree and saw the lady with the bloody smile staring at me again. So I ran to my cousins and said that we should all go home right now, and they surprisingly agreed. Then we drove back home, and that night my grandparents were talking about ghosts and war back in Laos. And as my grandma was still telling her story, I saw behind her what seems to be the same ghost that I saw earlier that day. The ghost was waving at me and smiling. That's when I yelled and pointed that there was a ghost behind my grandma. My grandpa said that there was nothing there. And that's when I explained what happened when we went fishing. So that night, my grandpa called a shaman over and he saw the ghost as well. So the shaman went to the altar in our house and did a ceremony. He asked me if we went to a fishing spot to where it looked like a forest. And I replied that we did. And that's when he said that we went into a ghost area. But he blessed us, so we're okay now. He said that we shouldn't go back to that spot again, or this time it'll take us. After hearing that, they then tied a red string to my left hand, and from that day on, I never went fishing there ever again. When my husband and I first got married, we moved into these newly renovated apartments. It felt like home, new and clean with a wonderful view of a creek and the forest. My husband is sensitive to the paranormal, so he'll usually tell me if he sees spirits. A few weeks passed and we went shopping for some home decor. We do have a daughter from his previous marriage. While out shopping, I thought it would be nice to get her a mirror. Since she's a preteen, it'll be nice to have it in her room. She was excited. When we got home, I told her to pick a spot and I'll get some hooks and hang it up for her. We chose to hang it behind the closet door because she has this huge walk-in closet. The next morning, I was cooking and she came to tell me that she found her mirror broken. We were a bit shocked. We didn't know what may have caused it, so we tossed the mirror out. A few days passed and my husband tells me that he's seen things, especially in our room. No harm, it just stands there throughout the night. I'm deeply afraid because I wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. He says that he didn't want to tell me because I would freak out, and I did freak out. He also says that late at night, he hears pots and pans rummaging in the kitchen. Needless to say, we broke our lease and moved out. This happened earlier in the month of September 2012. My mother-in-law sells vegetables at the farmer's market. Every Friday night for over the past 10 years, she would always get ready for Saturday farmer's market sale. She will stay up all night in the garage with the garage door opened until my father-in-law comes home at around 11 p.m. and they both will finish tying and gathering the flower bundles. Well, on this particular night, something happened. My husband works third shift and before he leaves, he will always check which car is available to take to work. Around 10 p.m., as he was opening the door, my mother-in-law ran up to the front door, which is next to the garage door. She immediately asked who was outside. Confused, my husband said no one. Yet my mother-in-law kept asking if it was my sister-in-law. My husband kept saying that no one went outside. At that time, my sister-in-law and I were sitting in the living room and we were confused why my mother-in-law kept asking such a question. My sister-in-law told my mother-in-law that she never went outside. My mother-in-law told us that she saw someone run right in front of the big garage door. The person ran so fast, but she couldn't make out who it was, but she was sure that it was a girl that was around 5 feet tall wearing shorts. In front of the garage door, we parked 2 cars, and my mother-in-law said that before that happened, she kept hearing clapping sounds coming from the bushes and trees near the garage door, but she ignored it. She told my husband to go check the backyard and see if anyone was over there. Now, it's 10 at night and super dark out. My husband gathered his courage and took the flashlight and quickly looked around the backyard, which was pitch black, and came back and said that there was no one. My mother-in-law still insisted that he check again. This time, my husband was too scared and he just came back inside, locked all the doors, and left to work. There was just my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my 2 daughters, and me, home by ourselves. My mother-in-law closed the garage door and quickly cleaned up. My sister-in-law wanted to look out the back door window but was too scared to do so, so she asked me. By this time, I was only afraid that it might be a burglar or a thief. I thought to myself how I will defend myself. I didn't have a gun and all we had were just knives. I gathered up my courage to look out the window, but there was nothing, just pitch black out. Finally, my mother-in-law came inside and called one of my sister-in-laws who was a shaman. I also called my mom because she was a shaman. I told my mom what happened, and my mom comforted me saying that it might just be the neighbor's kids, but I told her that it's not the neighbor's kids. It's 10 o'clock at night and there's bushes and trees around their driveway. I knew my mom didn't want to tell me, but she finally said that it's not a living thing and that it's a ghost. I hung up the phone and waited for my mother-in-law to finish talking on the phone. Once my mother-in-law was told it was a ghost, she ran towards my sister-in-law and I. We were beginning to panic and I was going to cry, so I told her to calm down and that the spirits feed off of fear. After my mother-in-law was done talking on the phone, she told us that the ghost was our aunt, who died of a heart attack years ago. The aunt was very mad because our uncle just did a ritual to keep her out of the house, and she's hungry and needed to vent. She tried coming into our house, but the spiritual house guards wouldn't let her. We felt a little better now that we knew who it was and why it did that. However, the next morning at the farmer's market, our uncle came to the farmer's market as if it was a coincidence because he rarely goes there. Well, my mother-in-law told him what happened, and he said that morning before he came to the farmer's market, somehow, strangely, his garage door was open, almost knee-high, and his chickens, which were caged and locked inside, were all released. He had to go find his chickens, which were hiding under their car, shivering, and strangely, 2 chickens were gone and nowhere to be found. My mom had to do a ritual for my mother-in-law. Ever since then, my mother-in-law would close the garage door while organizing and tying her flowers. A couple weeks later, my husband told his cousin, who is a rising shaman, about what had happened. His cousin told him that a couple of weeks before he had come to help my husband fix his car, he saw her. He saw her wandering our roadway, and she kept talking to him, but he ignored her. She waited for him near his car, and when he was leaving, he raced to his car so she couldn't catch up. He said that she was very mad because she couldn't get into their house as well as ours. I think my sister has a gift but hasn't realized it yet, or refuses to acknowledge it. Or maybe I'm wrong and it's just all coincidental. Regardless, she doesn't tell many people about the things she experiences for reasons I do not know. It's very rare that she will confide in me about what she experiences, so I will not mention her name because if she does happen to read Hmong ghost stories and sees this, she will be very angry with me if I mentioned her name. But I will share the experiences that she has told me about. What's her special gift, you ask? Well, I think the dead comes to talk to her in her dreams about their secrets, worries, and requests. But I'm not talking about random dead people. I'm talking about people that she was once acquainted with or personally knows. The first time she told me of her experience was when one of her friends drowned in a lake in her elementary school years. We went to her funeral, and my sister was still young at that time, so she was afraid to go look at her friend. We were there but didn't dare to go look at her for the last time. After the burial, she came to my sister and told my sister she didn't want to go yet, and that she felt scared. The second occurrence happened sometime in the early to mid-90s when Hmong gangs were still somewhat rampant. My cousin belonged to a gang, I can't remember which, but his friends murdered him and pushed his body into a lake. The police and our whole side of the family searched for his body for days. We could not find his body in the water or the surrounding forest. Finally, on the last day after not being able to find his body, we returned home and went to sleep. That night, my cousin came to my sister and told her to not stop looking for him because the people had tied a big rock to his body and that he's still there. He didn't want us to leave him there, but we never found his body. I can't remember if any of the people were ever prosecuted for what they did, because at that time, the police said that they didn't have sufficient evidence to convict them. The third occurrence was when one of my grandmother died. My grandma would always complain that she has indigestion and constipation, and that it caused her so much pain. After she passed away, my sister had a dream that my grandma came into our room and told us she was very cold and lonely in her big house. She told my sister to go with her, but my sister said that she didn't want to. Coincidentally, that night, I had a dream that I needed to use the bathroom and was trying to open the door. It was locked, so I kept twisting the knob until it opened, and my grandma was in the bathroom. I said, "Oh, sorry, Grandma," and she said for me to come and help her, that she's hurting so much. I wanted to go to her, but I must have woken up and told my sister, who was sleeping next to me, that I had a dream about my grandma, and she said that she did too. The fourth incident happened when my other grandma passed away recently. Poor woman had a stroke in her mid-60s and lived to be 82 years old like a vegetable. It was torturous and a gruesome sight to see her body slowly withering away. She was trapped, angry, and I didn't know what else she felt. But you can just see all her pain from her facial expressions and her eyes. Well, let's just say that the last few weeks and days of her life was not pleasant. Her food pipe was beginning to close up, and it was getting extremely difficult for her to eat or even swallow liquid. She literally chokes on every bite and drink. She can't even breathe for that duration, and she has to eat, and it just looks like she's drowning, gasping for any ounce of air that she can. I won't go into the details of how she was fed because I don't want to think about it. Anyways, after she passed, my sister had a dream that my grandma was very angry. She accused my sister of being the one that poisoned her and that's why she died. A few months later, my sister dreamed of going to visit her at a hospital, and my grandma said that she missed my sister so much. Weird, and it doesn't make any sense. But I still think it's strange, since I haven't had a single dream about my grandma, nor has anyone else in the immediate family that I've heard of, except for my sister. Maybe they were just dreams and nothing more. I don't know. My brother is the youngest son in the family, but he's older than the rest of us daughters. He had told me this story when he was a kid back in Laos. We were camping at the time. He said that as a child, my dad used to show him the spot where my father used to keep the hot coal that was dug underneath the ground, and would show my brother where the coal areas were kept, and how it was set up and covered with rocks, and where you can find it. Being a child in Laos who had nothing better to do, my brother and two of my cousins were still kids. They were walking on a path just like any other day, and one of the paths that they were walking on took them to a place which my brother and cousins didn't know. They found what he had thought was an area where they buried the coal. The ground looked like it was freshly dug up, so my brother and cousins started digging. My brother was wondering why they haven't found the coals yet. It didn't take them this long to dig up the coals. As the digging continued, it hit a flat surface. It was wood. He continued digging around it, and as it turns out, my brother had dug up a fresh corpse. When they saw what they had done, they ran all the way home. The thing is that the kid and the grave were set up the same way, so a kid that didn't know any better couldn't tell the difference. A couple of days later, my brother had heard a witch cry at night. My uncle questioned how he knew it was a witch's cry. He was a little child, so he shouldn't know how they cried. My brother said that it might have been a child, but he knew it was a cry of a witch. My brother had imitated the sound of how it cried that night. Continuing the story, a couple of days later, my family had called a shaman. He told us that the witch is looking for the children who are the firstborn of the family. For weeks, they would hear the cry of the witch. Black cats would be in front of the houses of the villages. That day, my eldest brother that had a twin had died that night, along with my eldest cousin who helped my brother dig up that hole. My mother's heart is still torn to this day.